Some afternoon showers, bringing that cool front, mid-50s for the low tonight, and then 60s for the next few days. Going to be nice. We're at 71 right now. Weather brought to you by Paul DeClote, attorney, mediator, arbitrator.
Support comes from Specs Wine, Spirits, and Finer Foods. Texas family owned and operated since 1962. Celebrating fall with a variety of wines, spirits, beers, seasonal sips, and more. Details at specsonline.com. The fun starts here.
Freeways loosening up a bit. Some earlier issues on the Southwest Freeway inbound 288. They cleared that out of the way. Also, South Sam eastbound before 288. Working another issue. That should be gone. Listen anywhere. We're streaming live online at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Download our app as well. It's KUHF Houston News 88.7. The service of the University of Houston, 9 o'clock.
You think your electric bill's been high lately? You might be surprised by how much some of your fellow Texans say they're being charged for power month to month. Then again, you might not. I'm Craig Cohen. Today on Houston Matters, the findings from a new survey report on the financial strain energy bills are putting on more and more Texans.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Also this hour, Texas Monthly's true crime writer Skip Hollandsworth discusses some of the most infamous crimes committed in the state by women. Then a conversation with longtime education policy expert and Houston native Diane Ravitch about why she did an about-face on standardized testing and school choice, plus the art and craft of puppeteering in Houston using repurposed materials. We'll start with a news update from NPRN News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The National Hurricane Center says the top-of-the-scale Hurricane Melissa has gotten even stronger. Top sustained winds are now at 180 miles per hour. Forecasters say the storm is approaching Jamaica's southern coast. Jamaican leaders are pleading with people to get to shelters. The mayor of Montego Bay, Richard Vernon, says Jamaican officials are using all their knowledge to protect people.
Last year we had Beryl, this year it's Melissa, and we knew what happened last year, so we are ensuring that we follow the same protocols, lessons learned from then, applying those now so that we can be better prepared and reduce the risk associated with the weather system that is coming.
He spoke to the BBC. Yesterday, Jamaica's prime minister warned there's no infrastructure in the Caribbean region that can withstand the strength of this hurricane's onslaught. The federal government shutdown is nearly a month old. State and federal officials all warn federal food assistance, also known as SNAP, will stop this Saturday. Claire Babineau-Fontenot heads the food bank network Feeding America.
There are two categories of people who tend to access the federal food system. One are people who, with the SNAP benefits, they still don't have enough to make ends meet, so they turn to us. But the fastest growing segment is actually people who don't qualify for any federal nutrition program. So imagine the pain that will be visited upon people who have relied upon SNAP in the past.
She spoke to NPR's Morning Edition. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. military has struck more boats in the eastern Pacific Ocean. Writing online, he says the U.S. hit 4 vessels, killing 14 people with 1 survivor. Mexican officials are responsible for rescuing that person. Hegseth says the boats were carrying drugs. He does not provide any evidence of his claim. Stocks opened higher this morning, extending Monday's rally. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average jumped about 300 points in early trading.
Investors are optimistic that an expected meeting this week between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping will lead to a ratcheting down of trade tensions between the world's 2 biggest economies. Trump held a friendly meeting today with the new Prime Minister of Japan. Amazon says it's cutting some 14,000 corporate jobs as it leans more heavily on artificial intelligence. Amazon is a financial supporter of NPR. Federal Reserve policymakers are meeting in Washington. When that meeting wraps up tomorrow, the central bank's expected to cut its benchmark interest rate by another 1/4 percentage point. That expectation was reinforced by a report last week showing slightly less inflation in September than forecasters had expected. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
And this update, the National Hurricane Center now says the top-of-the-scale Hurricane Melissa is continuing to gain strength. Top sustained winds are now 185 miles per hour. You're listening to NPR.
Support for NPR comes from the Skoll Foundation. dedicated to powering social innovators to transform the world. Learn more at skoll.org. And Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harrop. Former Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg is in court today to defend herself against allegations she broke a gag order. She's accused of openly discussing details about the murder of 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungaray during a television interview. The contempt hearing gets underway in about 25 minutes in front of Judge Josh Hill. The nonprofit Meals on Wheels is losing federal funding, which means an adjustment in services locally. Our Tom Perumian joins me live now with the latest there. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Matt. Nonprofit leaders say funding cuts are forcing them to scale back services for homebound seniors who receive food through the Meals on Wheels program. Alli al-Sudani is the Chief Programs Officer at I Am Houston, the nonprofit which runs the program in Harris and Galveston counties. He says they'll have to cut back services for about 300 seniors due to the loss of $500,000 in federal funding.
We can't let this happen to our seniors. They deserve better than this.
Fort Bend Seniors Meals on Wheels will also reduce their home-delivered meals from 7 to 5 meals per week starting next year, due to a reduction in federal funds.
All right, Tom. Drought conditions, tariffs, and a low supply of cattle have led to rising beef costs. News 88.7's Natalie Weber tells us more about why ground beef hit record high prices just last month.
Drought conditions have driven up the costs of grain and other materials needed for raising cattle, and ranchers are also feeling the squeeze of tariffs. That's according to John Diamond with Rice University's Baker Institute.
It means that, raising cattle is going to be difficult, and if you're a rancher, you're facing really high cost.
The number of cattle in the U.S. is also at its lowest point since the 1950s, driving up prices. The Trump administration vowed to quadruple Argentine beef imports, sparking backlash from Texas Agricultural Commissioner Sid Miller. Miller says the imports could hurt Texas ranchers and has drafted his own proposals to lower prices. I'm Natalie Weber, News 88.7.
And Missouri City Police have arrested 2 people in connection to a shooting that killed someone at a local Walmart yesterday. The incident happened at a location off of Highway 6 near the back part of the parking lot away from the store. KHOU reports that the victim was treated at the scene before being transported to Memorial Hermann Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Currently 75 degrees here on the UH campus. I'm Matt Harrop, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Good morning, and thanks for joining us here on News 88.7 and on YouTube. Coming up this hour, Texas Monthly's Skip Hollandsworth on memorable crimes committed by Texas women. Also, Houston native and longtime education official Diane Ravitch once supported standardized testing, school choice, and No Child Left Behind policies until she changed her mind. She'll tell us why. Plus, we chat with a pair of local puppet makers. But first, a new statewide survey finds nearly 1 in 3 Texans spend a high share of their income just keeping the lights on, sometimes they have to choose between paying their power bill or paying for food and medicine. That's among the takeaways from the latest Texas Trends survey from the University of Houston and Texas Southern University, focused on household energy burdens. Here to walk us through the details and what they might tell policymakers is one of the lead authors of the report, Gail Buttorff, Associate Director of the Center for Public Policy at the UH Hobby School of Public Affairs. Gail, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with some of the key findings themselves. Here is a stat that jumped out to me. Nearly 45% of respondents reported paying more than $200 a month for electricity. I believe this was over the summer months.
Correct.
I thought my bill was bad. That's pretty bad.
Right. Yes, over $200, which is above the average monthly summer bill for Texas. And again, we were asking people about how much they were spending during the summer because that's likely when their electricity usage is the highest in Texas.
A third of those who responded in this report spending 7% or more of their income. That's considered a high energy burden. Why?
Correct. So the energy burden is the percentage of your income, your total gross household income that you spend on energy. here, and that can include electricity, gas, and other fuels, wood, and so on. Here, we're just specifically looking at electricity. And the energy burden is if you're spending 6% or more on energy costs, because this is just one part of citizens' monthly bills, right? You have rent or mortgage payments, credit cards, other potential debts, and so spending 6% or more is considered a high burden household, right? And we have 33%, about a third of Texans spending more than 7% of their household income on summer electricity.
If that's a high burden, what's a low burden? What should we roughly be paying in terms of the percentage of our income towards something like electricity?
So that's a great question. I don't have a specific answer to that, but we do see, of course, higher income households are spending on average in the U.S. around 2% of their monthly household income on energy compared to the 6% on average for low-income houses. So I think really, we're looking at around 2 or 3%.
21% of respondents report struggling to pay their energy bills at least 3 times in the past year. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say for most of them, those 3 times are bills that cover the summer months. 19% report having to choose between paying those bills and essentials like food or rent. Is this level of insecurity a new development?
No, it's definitely not new. But, sort of the wide or sort of a systematic characterization of energy burden is difficult to establish. So this survey gives us an important insight into how Texans are faring in terms of balancing energy costs, importantly in the summer, because it's not just about cooling your house, right? Having unsafe temperatures in your home can lead to, a spate of health issues, right? It can affect how you study, how you learn, and so this is important that all Texans can live comfortably during the summer.
You also found these burdens are more significant in Black and Latino households. How big is that divide?
Yes, so we found that about 2/5 of Texans have difficulty paying bills, and that can be you had difficulty, maybe once or twice in the last year, to maybe 7 or more times you were having difficulty paying your electricity bill. And then we also asked Texans about whether or not you had to make difficult choices, right? Did you have to forego paying for something else, like potentially medicine or rent or other commitments in order to pay your energy bill? And we did find that about 25% of Black respondents, 30% of Hispanic respondents said that they had to make those difficult choices of paying for electric or natural gas bills and paying for other necessities like food, medicine, and rent.
Is it clear why there's such a disparity for them?
I think the biggest issue is that we have Black and Hispanic households also tend to be more likely to be low income, right? We have that those racial differences in income and vulnerability, and they tend to be the more vulnerable households and tend to live in areas, right, which may have seen a lack of investment.
How does the age and quality of homes themselves impact Texans' exposure to high energy costs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, of course, right, newer homes, right, tend, on average, to be more energy efficient, which can lower an individual's energy cost, especially in the summer, right? You have better insulation, better windows, so you're not losing as much of the air conditioning outside, right? And we found that low-income households tend to live in older homes or have less efficient homes. Or less efficient homes, which is going to, and that's one of the main ways you can try and make energy more affordable is energy efficiency in the home.
Ever since the winter freeze and the deadly outages in 2021, there's been renewed focus on how reliable the Texas electric grid is or isn't during extreme weather. Is that public perception of reliability reflected in your survey?
So we didn't ask about the reliability in this survey. We did do another survey directly after the storm, after the winter storm in 2021 that asked about perceptions of reliability, and of course it was fairly low. And we had another set of surveys about power outages last summer after the derecho and Hurricane Beryl.
In addition to other fees and discounts, our electric bills are made up of typically two big chunks. There's the charge for the amount of electricity we used for that month. Then there's how much the Public Utility Commission set in delivery charges to cover the costs utilities like CenterPoint Energy incur for maintaining and operating the grid. That can be made up of a fixed charge and a variable one, again, based on how much electricity we use, so we kind of get double billed. Does that reinforce to you that the more efficient our appliances are, our air conditioning, our light bulbs, all of it, the more of a real impact we can have on those month-to-month bills?
Yeah, I think investing in energy efficiency is huge, and having, especially for new buildings, new builds, new homes, right, either requiring a level of energy efficiency not only helps the homeowners, the renters, but will also help sort of reduce the strain on the overall electric grid. The other point about the fixed cost is, when we're looking at how can we make energy more affordable for all Texans, the fixed charges are the same, regardless of how much energy you're using or how much electricity you're consuming on a monthly basis. So therefore, you end up paying a higher rate per kilowatt hour if you're using less energy than those who would be using more. And so one way to address energy inequality and affordability is to adjust those fixed charges with like an inclining block rate program.
Let's get back to energy efficiency, though, for a minute, because I'm curious about the result of one question in your survey. You were asking whether respondents believe clean energy solutions could lower costs and improve efficiency. 39% said yes. It seemed like a pretty low number in light of what we were just talking about, just the pure practical nuts and bolts of how do you get your power bill down?
Yeah, we were surprised by this, that it was only about, 38%, as you said that it would help personal finances and improve energy efficiency. And we also had not only do we only have about 40% saying it would help both finances and energy efficiency, we had a high number of people that said, I don't know what clean energy solutions could do for me.
From a policy standpoint, what measures could make the biggest differences in reducing household energy burdens?
I think a lot of the policies we already have in some form at the state or national level can help. For example, I mentioned already the inclining block rates. There are other utility rate policies that can ease the energy burden, especially on low-income households, like having rates that are set according to the percentage of income. So you have percentage of income payment plans is another great tool to help reduce the energy burden. Now, of course, right, we have in place a federal policy, but it's unclear whether that will be fully funded and fully staffed to make it available to actually affect Americans struggling with energy burdens.
Gail Buttorff is Associate Director of the Center for Public Policy at the University of Houston's Hobby School for Public Affairs. Gail, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Up next, Texas monthly true crime writer Skip Hollandsworth on memorable crimes committed in Texas by women. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues.
Hi, I'm Michael Schaefer. My partner Ellen and I have been proud supporters of public radio and TV for decades.
We really would be lost without our daily fix of unbiased national and local news, cultural programming, and great entertainment.
But with recent federal defunding, stations like Houston Public Media face real challenges.
Now's the time to step up.
Give now at houstonpublicmedia.org.
Thank you.
a holiday tradition. Clara and the characters, intricate sets, and new discoveries return to the Wortham November 28th to December 28th. Tickets at HoustonBallet.org.
Support comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider dedicated to supporting the state's businesses through safety-focused policyholder plans and annual programs. More at texasmutual.com/TXM Advantage.
Support comes from Czech Center Museum Houston, presenting a concert for Czech Heritage Month on October 29th, featuring the Apollo Chamber Players performing works by Dvorak and Martinu. More information at czechcenter.org.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Texas Monthly readers know the work of writer Skip Hollandsworth. His long-form, deep-dive true crime stories are often a must-read. And over the years, some of his work has resonated so much with readers that they've been turned into movies, like the 2011 film Bernie, which he co-wrote with Houston native Richard Linklater, and 2023's Hitman, directed by Linklater. Hollandsworth's latest book showcases stories he's written about women who have committed infamous crimes in Texas. It's called She Kills: The Murderous Socialite, the Cross-Dressing Bank Robber, and Other True Crime Tales. Hollandsworth grew up the son of a Presbyterian minister and always expected he'd follow that same career path, but a notorious crime in his hometown of Wichita Falls and a foray into journalism sent him on a different journey. As he tells Houston Matters producer Michael Haggerty, Hollandsworth set out to write something more than just whodunits.
I was more interested in the why done it than the who done it. And I would be so fascinated by why certain people who lived modest, respectable lives, law-abiding citizens, would do things that seem so particularly crazy or foolish or horrific. What would drive them to do this one act? And those are the kind of stories I liked.
There's a line in the book that comes up a couple of times, though, that somebody says something about, like, that they're drawn to these kind of stories because where else can you find so much human nature?
And the truth is, we're fascinated by people who seem to embrace the shadow side. We have to check in, I think, is one of the people I quoted, with the shadow side of our lives. And we're captivated by these stories of people who do things that you cannot imagine doing yourself. And it's not just a story about someone who did a killing or someone who committed a spectacular crime. It's a story, I like looking for stories about people who touch their shadow side. Maybe just once. In fact, most of those stories in the book are one-time deals. Someone decided to do something one time, and you see what the repercussions were from that.
Why specifically focus a collection of books on women who commit crimes? What's so captivating for the general public, do you think?
Well, I didn't realize I was that captivated by women until one of the editors said to me, "Do you realize how many stories you've written about women criminals compared to men criminals, male criminals?" And I would think that can't be right. And I started counting it up. I wrote like 36 crime stories over a period of a few years at Texas Monthly. And I loved writing about women because, we always have this classical, stereotypical idealization of women as I hate to say it, but as the gentler sex. Now, there have been women like Bonnie and Clyde who seemed hardwired to commit crimes, but the ones I found interesting were women who really were sort of not known. They were wallflowers. They lived modest lives, or even if they did live elegant lives, like the Houston socialite I wrote about, they didn't seem to be a bother or troublesome. And then suddenly would come this outlandish killing that they would commit. And I would wonder why, what happened in their lives that led them to this situation?
Yeah, and as a journalist, I would say as well, what makes a story interesting is the more unusual it is, right? And so the whole man bites dog thing as opposed to dog bites man. And the 10% of the prison population, according to one of the stats you cite in the book, is women. So the vast majority of sort of the worst crimes are committed by men. And so I guess by their lesser number, I guess it's more there are less women committing these heinous crimes. So when they do, it's sort of maybe just by sheer default kind of captivates our attention.
Yeah, precisely. And I would get the chance to interview some of these women that I've written about. Or I would talk to, psychologists who got into the prison with them and interviewed them after they'd been convicted. And, she, like Cowboy Bob. Cowboy Bob is one of the great criminals in Texas history. Back in the early 70s, or back in the early 90s, a man dressed as a cowboy began robbing banks, little suburban banks around Dallas. Finally got caught by a fluke. The FBI said if you just changed your license plates out with ones you had stolen, you'd be clean as a whistle. But got carried away a little bit. And then when the FBI tracked him down, the agent started looking at his eyes and his face and his wig and thought, this is a woman. And it became, Cowboy Bob was a woman named Peggy Jo Tallis, middle-aged, down on her luck, lived with her mother in a small apartment complex. Tried to keep her mother alive, who was dying of a bone disease, in a lot of pain. And suddenly, out of nowhere, Peggy Jo Tallis, who was driving, I think, for a courier service, dropping off packages, decided to dress up as a cowboy and rob a bank. She had no training. She had not studied it, except for maybe watching Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. She had no criminal experience. She went after the teller. She handed the teller a note, said, this is a robbery. Give me all your money, no bait bills. When the teller, terrified, handed it over, the robber, Cowboy Bob, gave her a salute, walked out to the car with his head bent, did not hustle, did not run, did not cause a commotion, and drove off. Go to your neighborhood bank sometime and try to think of doing that. It's a terrifying act of bravery. And she did it 5 or 6 times before she got caught. And everyone tried to interview her to see what was going on with her. And a psychologist who was assigned by the court to see her told me that he sat across the desk from her, asked her about robbing banks. She smoked one cigarette after another, crossed her legs, and just looked at him and shrugged. And no one could understand this except one of her friends who said maybe Peggy Jo just liked robbing banks.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Michael Haggerty. I'm talking with Texas Monthly writer Skip Hollandsworth about his book. It's called She Kills, The Murderous Socialite, The Cross-Dressing Bank Robber, and Other True Crime Tales. So I want to talk about some of the cases that have Houston connections, since we're a Houston show. When you talk about big sensational crimes committed that involve money and River Oaks, in a socialite and everything, you think, okay, you've got to be talking about the infamous murder of Joan Robinson Hill, who was the subject of a book called Blood and Money that got a lot of attention. But no, actually, I'm talking about a different story. Tell me this story that you write about this particular socialite in the murder case in Houston.
In the 1940s, this very rich man named Jacques Mosler moved with his stunning young wife, Candace, to Houston from New Orleans, where he had been a banker and started several businesses and so on. He was on his way to great wealth, and this was at the time in the late 40s when Houston was on its way to great wealth. Money was flowing around like Niagara Falls, one reporter wrote. And, that's where the famous hotel was that everybody came for. The Glenn McCarthy, the oilman, opened a big hotel called the Shamrock, and he flew in all kinds of Hollywood celebrities for the opening night. It was a glamorous time to be in Houston. Oilmen were making deals on the street, and Candy, brand new to the city, young, gorgeous, began to climb her way up society's ladder. And she did well. She threw these elegant parties. She knew how to flirt, teasing with the men. She didn't upset women, not yet at least. She was just a joy to be around, one person told me. And then one day she decided with the children to visit Jacques, her husband, who had been staying on in their condominium in Florida while he was building another big bank. And so she got a hot migraine one night, and which she tended to do. She went out to the hospital with her children. She drove a convertible. They gave her an injection to feel better. She turned around and came back, and Jacques had been stabbed like 17 times and was laying on the floor wrapped in a blanket. Well, the police began digging and discovered that Candace had been having a fling with her nephew, Mel Powers, guy that looked like Elvis of Houston. He had that big, thick, coal black hair and, lean, had that kind of glaring look that everyone loved. And so this trial began that the New York Times would later call one of the most spectacular courtroom dramas ever witnessed. She was acquitted, by the way. She married again, and he mysteriously was thrown off the roof of their mansion, their 3-story mansion, by someone who has never been revealed. And she had another boyfriend or two who she might or might not have turned a gun on them. She was there was this wildness to her that no one knew about. And it would come out in these relationships she had with her rich Houston lovers. So what caused it? What caused her to be this way? Well, I did the usual digging. I mean, the magazine, this is why it's fun to work for Texas Monthly, because they gave me as much time as I needed to figure out the story. And I came close, but I think you'll have to read it and you'll look at the pages and think, is that the real answer? Because I'm confused by her. She remains a cipher to me. It's how someone who had so much would turn on one man after another.
From those times that you've sat face to face with someone in prison, some of the people in these stories or other ones you've done over the years, I mean, what have you taken away from those experiences and trying to get a sense of who they were?
This is hard to say, but I really went after the humanity in these people who committed these crimes. I gave them, I guess, a chance that they were not sociopaths. I wanted to understand them as real human beings, and not as sociopaths or psychotic killers or that sort of thing. I wanted people to read this book and see what their lives were like, these women's lives were like, until something like some corrosive resentment, some unanswered passion began bubbling to the surface of their lives, and they did something that I don't even think they expected themselves to do.
How do you think has writing about these kinds of stories, digging into the details, changed you or affected you?
Wow, what a question. I've never thought about before. There would be times when I would immerse myself in one of these stories and get really involved in the life of the woman I was writing about, and take forever to write stories. I'm the slowest writer you can imagine. So I would do all that work, that reporting, organizing notes, writing, typing up the story, fact-checking it, making it go through lawyers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of that exhausting process, I would tell my editor, look, I'm not going to write another one of these for a long time. It's just too exhausting, too depressing, too difficult, too hard to live with what these women could do and what they had done, and yet knowing that there was something human about them that we could all relate to. Gave that long speech. The editor would go, okay, go find another story. And I'd get online and I would start looking for stories, businessmen with big deals, celebrities, music profiles, Hollywood stories. And I would end up looking, getting distracted and looking for another true crime story to write. And there was always one out there. And there would always be something that would attract me, like a director of a funeral home in East Texas who murdered the town's grand dame and buried her in the freezer for 9 months before anyone started looking for her. And I literally would be up out of my chair getting dressed and putting clothes in a suitcase to go find out what happened. Is it an addiction? My love of these true crime stories? I don't know. But you find, weirdly, in this world of murder and passion, you find this humanity in these women or in the people you write about in crime stories. And you want to explore that, see what led them to become what they became.
Texas Monthly true crime writer Skip Hollandsworth. His latest book is called She Kills, the Murderous Socialite, the Cross-Dressing Bank Robber, and Other True Crime Tales. He spoke with Houston Matters producer Michael Haggerty. Just ahead, why and how former Assistant Secretary of Education and Houston native Diane Ravitch changed her mind about school choice, testing, and, as her new memoir suggests, almost everything else. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues.
Want to binge All Creatures Great and Small, catch up on Nova, or revisit Ken Burns' documentaries? You can with PBS Passport. With a gift of $5 or more per month to Houston Public Media, you'll get access to PBS Passport that lets you watch your favorite programs anytime you want. Support the programs you love and enjoy them on your own schedule with PBS Passport. Make your gift now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
At houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Support comes from Foster LLP, helping individual scientists, scholars, researchers, and doctors pursue achievement-based immigration options in their fields of endeavor. More at fosterglobal.com, U.S. and global immigration services.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is made possible in part by Ellen Benninghoven and Dr. Michael Schaefer, and with gifts from listeners like you.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Houston native Diane Ravitch was once the Assistant Secretary of Education under President George H.W. Bush. She also supported President George W. Bush's No Child Left Behind policies, until she didn't. She writes about why she did and about face on high-stakes standardized testing and school choice, among other things, in her new book, An Education, How I Changed My Mind About Schools and Almost Everything Else. Diane Ravitch, welcome to Houston Matters. Good morning.
Well, great to be with you, Craig. I feel I'm a little bit in Houston just talking to you.
As we chat with Diane Ravitch, we welcome any questions or comments you have for her at talk@houstonmatters.org. You can call or text 713-440-8870. You can post your thoughts on our video stream on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Well, let's start with Houston, if you don't mind. What are your enduring memories of childhood growing up here?
Well, I have a chapter or two about growing up in Houston, and I was born in St. Joseph's Hospital. I grew up at 1314 Richmond Road, and my father owned a liquor store a couple of blocks away. So I then went to Montrose Elementary School, which I believe is now the Houston High School for the Performing Arts. And then I went to Sutton, which was in a neighborhood called Riverside. You know, the problem I have with Houston is nothing stays the same. When I go to Houston, I have this problem of I don't know where I am. Everything's changed. I spent my first 18 years living there, and I don't know where anything is. 610 didn't exist when I was living in Houston. So it was a totally different city. I remember how excited we were when we crossed 300,000 in population. That was a long time ago.
If it makes you feel any better, longtime Houstonians who have been living here see things changing all the time, even today. So,
well, I finished my elementary years at Sutton Elementary School in Riverside. Then I went to a school called Albert Sidney Johnson Junior High School, which was named for a Confederate general. And I should mention that every school I went to in Houston was segregated. And I finished at San Jacinto High School. San Jacinto High School is now Houston Community College. So I was through and through a Houstonian, and I have stayed very much in touch with what's happening in Houston, especially in the schools. And I stayed in touch with Texas because I subscribe to the Texas Monthly, the Texas Tribune, the Texas Observer, the Houston Chronicle, and the Dallas Morning News. Now, what's that about? It's a kind of obsession with the fact that I'm still a Texan, even though I haven't lived in Houston in many, many years.
You write that you began life in Houston as part of a large, rambunctious, and disorganized family that was struggling to maintain a secure middle life status, or at least the appearance of one. How do you think that informed the way you looked at the world, at least as you grew up?
Well, I felt very much a loner and a very large family because I wasn't the only one, but I certainly was different because I really loved school. I loved reading. I'd climb up in a tree to read a book and get away from everybody. So it had a large impact on me because I felt different and I acted differently. I did what I wanted to do. And I think it made me kind of headstrong, knowing that I alone was the only one who was making my way in school and really loved school. And ironically, I end up being a historian of education and frequently revisit my time in Houston because it was a time where McCarthyism was rampant in Houston, where we had a crazy school board every other election, which was every 2 years. And whatever was in one time would be out the next time when they changed school board members.
Politically, your family, you write, was primarily Democrats, leaned to the left. You, as time went on, leaned more politically to the right, at least through your early adulthood and then ensuing years in public education. What led and education policy? What led you to kind of steer that direction?
Well, I grew up in a family that they thought they were not racist, but they were racist. Everybody in Houston was racist, every white person, I should say. And it's important to remember, I grew up in the 1940s and the 50s in Houston. Everything was segregated. Blacks were treated horribly. Any Black person who came to our door was expected, as in every house, to go to the back door, not the front door. And it was we might as well have been in the Deep South. I thought of myself as a liberal. When I went to college in Massachusetts, I thought I was a liberal. And then the ideas that I had growing up, which was, the best thing would be if we were all colorblind. If we just didn't see color, then color wouldn't matter and everybody would be treated fairly. Well, the times changed more than I changed because being colorblind is not really liberal. It means that you're just going to ignore all the differences that exist. One of your prior speakers talked about how most of the people living in low-income neighborhoods are either Black or Latino, and that's just a reality. If you don't notice it, then you're being colorblind, but you're also being blind to all the burdens that have been put upon people of color in our society. So as a writer, and after I graduated from college in Massachusetts, I went to Wellesley College, where I was steered by my rabbi's wife at Beth Israel, Congregation of Beth Israel in Houston. After I graduated college, I married, I had children, and one of my children died of leukemia, which was a horrible, horrible experience. And I subsequently said, I'm going to be a writer. And I started writing, and the topic that I chose was to write about the history of the New York City public schools. And more than one person said to me, how can you write about the New York City public schools when you went to the Houston public schools? And I said, well, how can people write about the Civil War when they weren't there? But that was my first book, and it got me a lot of attention. And I started writing, and I had this idea of meritocracy, high standards. Standardized testing was okay with me because I had gotten into that great Eastern college because of having high SAT scores. So that was my outlook. And as time went by, it placed me on the right side of the spectrum. And I was no longer a liberal. I was a neoconservative. So I worked for George H.W. Bush, who I thought was a great gentleman. I just met him one time when I was with the Secretary, Lamar Alexander, and I thought he was a very fine person. Subsequently, I was part of right-wing think tanks, one the most prominent of them being at the Hoover Institution in Stanford. And I went to meet George W. Bush when he was just thinking about running for president. I guess he was beyond thinking about it, but I was part of a group that consulted with him on education. And when he got elected, I thought that was great. And he brought out No Child Left Behind. I thought that was terrific, except that I was very concerned about No Child Left Behind for one reason. It said that every school in the country would be required to have 100% of their students at proficient within 12 years, which was, at the time it was passed, I meant by 2014, every student would be proficient. And I thought that was crazy. What happened over the next several years was schools were closed all over the country because they were not on track to be 100% proficient. In fact, I don't know if there were any schools in the country that reached that impossible goal. So I guess that as the things that I believed in began to fail, I turned against them. I was charter schools. I was an early supporter of charter schools. And I wrote articles saying how they would lead to innovation and accountability and all sorts of good things. And then as time went by and there were more and thousands of charter schools, I began to see grift, embezzlement, cheating, charter schools choosing the students they wanted and pushing out the ones they didn't want, not accepting kids with disabilities. And so here were all the things that I thought were good things, and they were turning bad. And I turned against standardized testing. So I turned against standardized testing. I turned against charter schools. I turned against vouchers. And at the same time, I began to see issues of race very differently. One of the founders of critical race theory, Derek Bell at Harvard Law School, who's a Black man, I thought he was right on. I thought we were going to get better and better every year. And he said, no, we're not. We're going backwards. And I argued with him about that. And then I began to understand we're not going forward. You know, we have some token things that look good, like seeing Blacks on television, seeing Black people in positions of authority. And that's a result of affirmative action. And now we have a president who's against affirmative action, who's against teaching Black history, who's against teaching honest history. And I'm definitely on the other side. I now consider myself to be very much a liberal. I'm not, I say in the book, I went from being conservative to being woke. And I'm not crazy woke, but I sincerely believe that my childhood in Houston would have been a lot better had I had some Black friends. I didn't have a one.
What do you hope readers will take away from what you see as the lessons that you've learned and the transformations you've gone through in both attitudes and experiences throughout your life?
Well, I hope one thing they'll take away is to look at the evidence. Just before you go off the deep end and feel certain that you're right, listen to the people on the other side, talk to them, and ask yourself whether you're sure, and look at the evidence. One of the things that has frustrated me the most in these past few years is that the evidence against vouchers is overwhelming. And yet state after state has endorsed it, most recently Texas. And I followed the debate in Texas very closely, and friends of mine were very involved fighting against vouchers. And it passed, and it passed despite the fact we know that vouchers are really supporting kids who are already in private school. So now the state of Texas is subsidizing the tuition of rich families and subsidizing tuition for kids to go to be homeschooled. We know the academic results are horrible. The kids who do leave public school and get vouchers don't make progress. In fact, they go backwards. They fall behind their peers in public schools. So I'd say the first thing is look at the evidence. Be aware that you might change your mind. Don't be so certain all the time. And my last life lesson, because I fell down the stairs and broke one of my knees, is always hold on to the handrail.
Oh, boy. I'm sorry to hear that.
Very important.
But it's a very good lesson to learn and to impart. Diane Ravitch is a Houston native who's spent her life in education policy. Her new memoir is called Uneducation: How I Changed My Mind About Schools and Almost Everything Else. Diane, thank you so much.
Thank you, Craig. Lovely to talk to you.
And still to come, we discuss the art of puppetry. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues.
Hello, I'm Bob Maniger from the Ed and Jean Matthews Foundation. PBS has been a part of our family for generations, and we are proud supporters of Houston Public Media. From PBS Kids programming that supports children and their parents to PBS NewsHour that we rely on to learn about what's going on in our world. Your support keeps PBS available for our community across Greater Houston. Give now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
A congressional seat and a city council seat are up for consideration, as well as 17 state constitutional amendments, many involving taxes. Special coverage begins Tuesday, November 4th at 8 p.m. on News 88.7 and online at houstonpublicmedia.org.
Support comes from Children's Museum of Houston, presenting Faithful Friends, an exhibit fostering connection, curiosity, understanding, and friendship. Families explore other cultures through the eyes of Houston kids. More at cmhouston.org.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Mercury Chamber Orchestra, presenting a concert featuring Mozart's Final Symphony, the Jupiter Symphony, plus his Clarinet Concerto and more. November 8th at the Wortham. More at mercuryhouston.org.
I say puppets, and you probably think of Sesame Street, the Muppets, and sure, they are the undisputed champions of the art form in popular culture. Here in Houston, you can find a variety of puppet makers and performers whose creations may be a bit more experimental or out of the box. Take the work of Lo-Fi Puppets and Stuff, who turn repurposed materials like pieces of cardboard and wood into magical creations. Alli, Villines and Greg Cote from Lo-Fi Puppets and Stuff join us now. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
What first drew you each to puppetry?
I didn't get into puppetry until later. In my mid-20s, I worked at a theme park doing full-body costume character. But it was Sesame Street, and one was an actual puppet, and it was Oscar the Grouch. So I got to learn, actually, from the Elmo at the time, Kevin Clash, how to puppeteer. And from there, I did some film. I lived in Virginia, and I was in love with it at that moment. So,
Greg?
I've just always been into it. I loved the Muppets and Sesame Street and all of Henson's creations as a kid, but I was also a huge fan of I grew up for a time in San Diego, California, and we'd be walking through Balboa Park, and there'd always be buskers with weird marionettes or like just weird little dudes. And I honestly, that's my favorite genre of puppetry, is the weird little dude genre. I'm a big fan of just weird little stuff that you see out in the world, and you're like, oh. That energy is big for me, and that's what I hope to create with my puppetry.
Yeah, and as I said, Lo-Fi Puppets and Stuff, you use some different materials, different approaches. You're using repurposed materials. What led you to want to do that?
Well, I actually took a class in grad school that was puppetry in education, and weekly we would make puppets. So it's like building puppets really quickly with materials, with found material especially, and we had to write a lesson plan with it. And that's when I learned about bread and puppets. That's when I learned about like giant puppets. That's when I learned about, just all the different facets of puppetry. And Greg is sort of our main builder. I did build, but I don't build quite as much as Greg. So.
All right. So, Greg, how do you start to build a puppet from scratch?
I do a very basic sketch of the shape that I'm looking for just to get it in my brain. And then I work very quickly, and I work in 3D. I try to sculpt it, essentially. So I know the basic shapes that I want. I will occasionally go to, if there's something specific I'm looking for, I'll go to a craft or a hardware store, try to find those shapes in something that already exists, or I'll go through my big pack rat bucket of nonsense that I have in our studio, and I'll say, oh, that looks kind of like a bird body. I could do some stuff to that. And then you just start doing stuff. That's really the way that I like to work, is just start making it out of whatever we have. That's sort of what led to the repurposed materials. Is I had a bunch of cardboard when I wanted to start doing this, so I started making it out of cardboard.
Good golfers can do just about anything with a 7-iron.
Sure,
yes. What's the 7-iron of puppetry for you?
For me, it's a box cutter, the foldable Husky box cutter. I have that on me most days. And in the studio, it's in my front pocket on my apron. And that is what I use. That and a hot glue gun. Those are the two things that make everything work in our studio.
Is there a particular material that you find is really useful to use?
A cardboard is my all-time favorite. It's just like wood in so many ways, but exponentially cheaper. It has a grain. You can get to use it. You can cut it into all these shapes. It can be load-bearing. You can layer it. You can laminate it. It's truly an incredible material.
What is it that you're trying to ultimately make it look like? Is it vary each time? Are you trying to aim towards an end goal of something where somebody looks at it and says, "Oh, I know exactly what that is"?
Occasionally. So we brought some stuff here.
Yeah.
For the listeners at home. I have a little grackle puppet that we made because we're around grackles all the time, and this one obviously we want it to look like a grackle, right? But then there's other stuff. I'm a huge fan of just how close can I get to where the audience knows what they're trying to get at, right? So this is a little guy that I have here. It's a styrofoam ball on a wood stick, and people can see the eyes and the nose, and they know, oh, that's a person, and they're good to go.
And you've got some strings attached to.
So it's a
slides
coat hanger
Yeah.
and a scrap piece of PVC,
Okay.
and it creates a very sophisticated mech that allows it to look in pretty much any direction you want it to.
So yeah, you move the PVC pipe piece up and down.
Yeah.
And it moves the face all around, or the head all around.
Yeah.
And then with the grackle, that's almost like two pieces, right?
Yes. So with the grackle, I have the middle section here. The body is I want to say it's 2 styrofoam balls that I got out of like a different puppet, and then I taped them together. This is just a tape ball over the mechanism that I built out of a rubber band.
So that creates the head.
That
and
creates the head, and then the wings are screen that I found at Texas Art Asylum. Shout out Texas Art Asylum. It's the best store in the whole city. And yeah, we combine it all together until it looks like the thing we want it to look like.
And then what kind of performance do you do with this? How does it tend to?
So our puppet performances, I love that we have the and stuff because we do puppetry, we do shadow puppetry, we do these puppets that you see, and just all different mediums of puppetry. But then there's also stuff that is like, well, that's not a puppet, but it is. It falls it's adjacent. It falls in the realm. We do cranky boxes. We have a bunch of crankies on YouTube. A cranky is, before there were movies, right? You had a scroll, and you load the scroll and you crank it through this box.
So it's like cylindrical kind of shape, and
yes,
and it creates with several images all the way around, and it looks like those images then are moving.
Are moving, yes,
right.
The moving picture. So there's a great tradition of that, and all of our pieces we write, and I make music. So yeah.
Yeah, Alli composes everything that we do except for a few very small pieces where we will like lip sync to a song that is popular. Alli composes all the music for the stuff that we do as well.
You have a show tonight at Stinson House.
We do.
Well, tell us just a little bit about this, performing along with Adam Clark, who's an Atlanta-based marionette artist.
Yes,
What you know
Adam
about?
Clark is a great puppeteer, full-time marionettist and busker, and he's bringing his puppet pants and counter to Houston, and we are so happy to have that. And then we're going to do our show, The Stuff-O-Matic, which is a really cool piece where we build a puppet theater in front of the audience, and it's a collection of short-form puppetry, and the audience picks the order of the show, so it's never the same show twice. They pick it as the show is happening, and I think your husband, Jeff, did the math. It's like 48,000 possibilities or something like that. Yeah. So there's no way for it to be the exact same show twice.
Then when the show is over, we break down the puppet theater.
Yeah,
So
the whole show lives on a dolly.
A lot of spontaneity, improvisation
That's the
associated
goal.
with this.
Absolutely.
Is that sort of key to puppetry in your mind?
I think it's key to what we do, for
Yeah.
sure. We want it to feel like it's important that the audience is present. If I want to have some art happen that doesn't matter whether I'm there, pardon me, I can watch a movie. But yeah, if the audience is going to be there, we want the audience to be there. That's a big thing for us.
Lo-Fi Puppets, again, their next show is tonight at Stinson House. They're performing along with Adam Clark. This is a marionette artist. Alli Villines is the executive whimsist. Greg Cote is the main maker of stuff and nonsense for Lo-Fi Puppets and stuff. Boy, I hope you have business cards that say that. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Thank you both very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And that will do it for today's show. The Houston Matters team includes Michael Haggerty, Joshua Zinn, Brenda Valdivia, Mincho Jacob, and Laura Walker. Jared Carroll's our technical director. On tomorrow's show, the latest developments in politics. In our regular Wednesday political roundup, we'll talk with Party Politics co-host Geronimo Cortina and Rice University political science fellow Mark Jones. Also, we learn about a Photo Fest retrospective of Houston artists Mary Magsamen and Stephen Hillerbrand and their work, which would take a lot longer to explain than I have time for here. Michael Haggerty will walk us through it. I'm Craig Cohen. Join us tomorrow for those and other Houston Matters.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Baylor College of Medicine through research.